career, I've had the pleasure of dancing till dawn with Beyonce. I've had dinner with Idris Elba. I've been on a private plane with Elton John, but never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be spending my Thursday afternoon at a speaker's corner virtual masterclass. So I guess my first message would be dream big, everybody. This could be how life is for you. And it was great when Speaker's Corner said, do you want to come and talk about what the future holds, Callie? I thought that is absolutely fantastic because I have no idea. But what I do know is I know a fair bit about change and reinvention. So I'm going to share with you a couple of my thoughts. And I'm also going to tell you about a conversation that changed my life. I should also point out that I have got a right shiner of a black eye, not because I've changed careers and just gone 3 rounds with Conor McGregor, but because I've taken up running and I fell over. So if you like what I say today, then I'll make sure I bash myself on the head again when you book me to say it to you again. And if not, I'll change it completely and it's concussion. So with those caveats firmly in place, I'm going to start by talking about human connection, because it's my belief that commercial excellence comes hugely from human connection. And that as we go through our working lives, IQ, which we'll all assume everybody here has in spades, that's very important, but EQ becomes absolutely as important, if not more important than IQ. So what's happened in the world at the moment is everything's got smaller, hasn't it? And all those serendipitous, brilliant things that used to happen where we'd have a random conversation with somebody that we weren't expecting to have, that's all gone. And the world has got very personal to our bedrooms or our front rooms. I'm going to show an image to you. So when you look at this, you will be able to see an image. Lots of you will be able to see 2 pictures. Those of you who can only see 1 picture, this is not an IQ test, absolutely nothing wrong with you, but I will just explain where the 2 pictures are. There's a rabbit with ears, an eye and a little twitchy nose. And then if you turn the ears into a beak, you've got some kind of animal, a duck maybe, with a little beak, an eye and a twitchy little strange hole in the back of its head. Now, why am I showing this to you? You're busy people with things to do. Well, you'll all remember this image. This went viral a few years ago, and this was the most stark example of what I just showed you, where everybody saw the cream and the gold dress, or the blue and the green dress, and blue and the black dress, and no one could believe that what they were looking at was completely different to the thing that someone else had right in front of them. So I guess my first message about living in a lockdown and post-lockdown world would be to mind the gap between our world and the other people that we're dealing with. And we may have to be quite creative in how we learn to bridge that gap. And I'm going to give you a couple of ideas from my own career. And I will, by the way, just give a quick example, if I may, of how misunderstandings can very easily happen. I ended up sending my ex a text last night just to see if he fancied going for a socially distanced drink. And autocorrect changed it to, "You've ruined my life. I hope I never see you again." So all I'm saying is that misunderstandings can happen, right? In or out of a pandemic. But a couple of thoughts on this before I move into a story of professional and then personal change is we used to do a thing when I was at MTV. Zoe mentioned I was on the board of Viacom for the past 10 years. And the things that we worked on, the brands we had were brands like Paramount Pictures, Comedy Central, MTV, Nickelodeon, quite young skewing brands. So when I was at senior level in that company in my 40s, I had no idea what people that age actually felt like watching our shows. I knew how to monetize them. So what we did is we had reverse mentoring. We would try and engage with younger, less experienced voices in the business. We would have more junior members of staff who would sit on our program development boards and influence the editorial decisions we were making. And you know when I knew that was working? When we stopped calling it reverse mentoring. Because why would somebody very different and much less professionally experienced than me not have plenty to teach me about how I might approach my professional life? So my first message is, let's get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, and let's somehow find a way of seeking out difference in our professional networks, because a lot has changed and we may only have heard the viewpoints of the people who we tend to gravitate towards, who are people like us. Now, I also want to talk about two stories of change and reinvention. The first is from my professional life. So working at MTV as I did, the first time I worked there was not too long after its launch. I'm a woman in my 50s, by the way, and I'll take your silence as stunned. So some of you may be nearly as ancient as me, and you may know that MTV launched in 1981, and it was a world-beating, enormously powerful brand. It was iconic, and it was all about the music video. That's all they did, wall-to-wall music television. The M in MTV was for music. The very first video that was played on MTV was Video Killed the Radio Star back in 1981. And then something came along to kill the music video, or certainly the music video on MTV, Napster, MySpace, later on YouTube. Suddenly the whole of MTV's inventory was available anywhere in the world, anytime, anyhow. And MTV had to reinvent its entire business model before the very eyes of its viewers. And MTV started commissioning content like Beavis and Butthead, The Real World. Nowadays, the M in music television does not stand for music anymore. They took the music out of music television. They became part of Viacom. They spread their business risk across channel launches instead of it all being about individual channel programming in the United States. And to this day, MTV is still a very, very successful international business. And then what happened next? Well, Scott touched on this when he was talking just now, digital transformation. Well, I'm sure all of you are an erudite enough audience to have thought about the impact of streaming services on traditional broadcasters. Netflix, that's a 20-year-old story now, although we've only been aware of it over here probably for more like a decade plus, but it's been around for 20 years. And think about a business like Disney Plus. They launched in March last year at the start of lockdown. What a brilliant time to be running a streaming service. Netflix, Tiger King, who wasn't watching that? But the change will keep coming. Netflix is having to reinvent now. They've announced their subscriber base now flattening off and even lessening in the light of the whole world opening up. So the only thing we know is that the future will be different, and it will be radically different. And the very last thing I want to tell you is a personal story of reinvention, because reinvention can mean two things, right? It could be radical reinvention, or it could be something tinier, like the butterfly effect. That's chaos theory, right? That the tiny perturbation of the flapping of the wings of a butterfly will have a direct effect on the date, the course, and the strength of a tornado many weeks hence. So whether you're thinking as you watch this about a radical reinvention of yourself or your business, or a tiny flapping of the wings that might have a radical impact. I was always a little nervous of change. And when I was working at Viacom, I had the pleasure of, on the Comedy Central slate, getting to know some incredible A-list talent. I name dropped a few of them shamelessly at the start of what I was talking to you about today. And I had the pleasure of working several times with the late, great Joan Rivers. And I would introduce her to the stage at events that were held for drunken television executives for us to try and get them to invest in shows with her in. And I would intro her to the stage. Got to know her quite well. And the very last time I saw her, which was over dinner, just a few weeks before she died. Not connected, I should add that. And she said to me, she said, Callie, you should think about taking up stand-up comedy. And I said, Joan, I'm 45. I'm a single parent of 2 kids. One of them's got special needs. I've got a rather big day job. The ship has sailed. It's too late. And she said, Callie, I'm 81. You're in the thick of it. Why don't you? And a month after that, I did my first ever stand-up gig. I now am lucky enough to work as a stand-up comedian and a performer. And in the words of the late, great Bob Monkhouse, everybody laughed when I said I wanted to be a comedian, but they're not laughing now. So very last thing for me is about underestimation. So if we're thinking about what we can do differently, and crucially what our business contacts and people who work for us and people we engage with in whatever capacity in our careers, it's about us opening our minds to the fact that what we see is perhaps not always what we get in terms of the talent that we can work with and the business opportunities that might be unlocked within. And a very last postscript for me before we open up to the panel is that when I turned 50 last year, it coincided with a B-list French celebrity, a man by the name of Yann Moix, making global headlines because he said a woman at 50 is invisible. So you're very lucky to be seeing me today. And I decided, well, is that right, monsieur? And that year I decided I would take to the Edinburgh Festival a show called Invisible. I decided to become more visible than I'd ever been, and to see what life might hold, even if I jettisoned, as I then did, my day job and made my side hustle my main hustle. So that's my last comment, really, is to say maybe your side hustle might become your main hustle. And if that's been necessitated by the pandemic, that might be a pretty good thing. So I'll leave you, because I'm an inspirational speaker, on an inspirational quote. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. Michelangelo. Isn't that amazing that that quote came from a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? So with that, I'm going to hand back to the marvelous Zoe.